Autogenic training, very complicated. If you love yoga, you might like it because it's got lots of exercises that are very demanding exercises. It works, but it's also very long and lengthy. And like so much of all these things, they generally require a coach, a facilitator, a practitioner. So utilizing them to make some uncovering, to break through some invisible barrier, good idea. But even when you do utilize them, you'll talk to any one of these people that use them, and they'll tell you what I'm going to tell you today. Getting into the unconscious is not simple. Augmenting some way of changing that dialogue inside your head is desirable. Breaking through those self-imposed limitations is a necessity. And the responsibility to do that is you, not the facilitator, but you. In America, where it's used with physicians, healthcare practitioners, it's considered to be a take-home modality. You see your psychotherapist, you go home, and you have a little bit of therapy. So it isn't that these things aren't good or that they don't work, it's that for most of them, they take time that we're not inclined to invest in improving ourselves. Well, there's another problem that accompanies this, and that has to do with our motivation. We say to ourselves, I want this. This is for me. I'm going to do this. So there's a great speaker coming to town. He's known to be, he, she, a great motivational person. And you say, you know, I'm going to go there and I'm going to get the secrets to all the success in the world. I'm going to hear this person. You go to them and you listen. We've done exit studies on some of these motivational rallies. And boy, there are some that they're contagious, they're electric. The hackles on your neck stand up, you get goosebumps. Wow, wow. They have lights going in the background. They're like magic acts. And when you leave, we ask, hey, is this going to make a difference? And the vast majority say yes. Boy, I got some things here today that are just really going to change my life. I'm so glad I came. And then we go back 60 days later and we ask these people, what have you done? How did you use the tools that you learned? Oh, you know, it just didn't work for me. I mean, I think my personality is a little different than that. Oh, I haven't had time yet. You know, I'm still probably going to do something, but I haven't had time. I just haven't got around to it. And on and on and on and on. Lots of excuses. Only a very small percentage of those people that went to that seminar actually used the tools. Actually follow through. There's some script inside them, some resistance that's stopping them. It has nothing to do with the fact that it was a good tool or a bad tool that fits their personality, doesn't fit their personality. It has nothing to do with whether or not they had the time. They spent a lot of good money to go there. They spent maybe a day, maybe 5 days attending. All it has to do with some inner script. That's why they don't do it. And then the next time somebody comes to town, not right away because we've got to have time, and you know we have to clear that out. Maybe the next year, oh, there's a great speaker coming to town. I'm going to go there, and we do it all over again. You see a self-improvement industry, and you see people that are going to one after another, like the first one didn't have the answers that they told us it did. Has nothing to do with that. Has to do with them. Has to do with you. You ultimately have that responsibility. There's first denial. Everybody knows what denial is. No, I didn't do that. Wasn't me. Only we get denial in the unconscious as well. We get denial that refuses to acknowledge certain behaviors, that even rationalizes those behaviors. We have fantasy formation. Fantasy formation is simply, boy, if I ever run into her again, I'm going to say, I don't know, I can't see enough to tell. You know? We fantasize not just about our behavior, but we fantasize about what we could have said, should have said, how we should have acted, could have acted, both in creating who we are and in creating defense mechanisms. It's their fault, not mine. We have introjection. That's common. We take too much blame. We put it all back on ourselves. I must not be any good. I just never have been able to do that. Or I just made a mistake. In acute cases, this can literally paralyze the human condition and its potential. We have isolation. Oh, that's withdrawal. We just pull away. We just disengage. Maybe we disengage like I'm never going to be on a stage. I'm not a singer. I can't hit a note. There's no way I'm going to ever sing again. But we isolate not just ourselves, but our behavior from ever engaging in some activities. And we also do that in defense mechanisms in how we perceive what we don't perceive. And I'll show you that visually in a minute. We have projection. I remember an arrest one day. The guy has just committed a burglary. He's fleeing from the scene. County detective grabs him. They're in a big fight. And I happen to just be driving by. Bang, out of the car. We cuff this guy. He's standing up. He's going to sue me. He's going to sue the county. He didn't do anything. This is a false arrest. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da. We tip his coat upside down, and it's got the contents of the house in it. What we have in projection is you're guilty, not me. And we see that very, very often in personal relationships. There's some behavior that's not working, and you accuse the other one of the behavior that you're doing yourself. That's projection. We have regression. True regression, we literally go back to an infantile age. I once worked with a young man by the name of Vic, whose father had access to every hospital in the world. And his son had been cross-diagnosed with multiple sclerosis and polio. But the bottom line, he was in a degenerative condition, in a wheelchair, and given a very short life expectancy. Boy was 14 years old. Vic flew into my offices. Is there anything we can do? We went through his profile at great extent. Robert Youngblood, an MD, qualified in this area, joined me, and we developed a profile. We basically concluded this was some kind of sibling rivalry because Vic was born healthy, he was born well, everything in his life was going great, he was the center of the universe, a very affluent family, being literally bathed with anything and everything, and then he has a sibling born. Well, the sibling suddenly is a center of attention, and Vic suddenly starts getting ill. All of the attention shifts back to Vic, and the sicker he is, the more attention he gets. He has special wheelchairs, the house is rigged with elevator lifts on the stairs, no expenses barred. Well, the only thing in Vic's history, and we kind of overlooked this at the beginning, was he had a minor birth defect that required a tracheotomy. Tracheotomy was done when he was 2. Sibling was born shortly thereafter. And I tell you that because it becomes important. We created the profile, sent the programs home with Vic Sr. Vic put a sound system throughout his house, which would be his style. It played in every room, 24 hours of the day. Vic Jr., in the middle of the night, 24-hour surveillance, the alarm goes off, he can't breathe. They rush him to the hospital. They do a tracheotomy. He recovers from the trach and the wheelchair. I have a picture of this boy, 16 years of age, 2 years later. There's no degeneration. He's standing proudly holding his driver's license up, sending me a letter with his photograph standing next to his new vehicle. 16, chasing girls, having fun, doing what 16-year-olds do. Regression. 20/20 hindsight, what did he do to cause a tracheotomy at 14? Turned his oxygen up. That's what caused the choking. That's what led to leading him to the hospital. Did he consciously do that? I don't know. Is there a correspondence between he's in optimal health at 2 years of age, the tracheotomy, and returning to optimal health following a tracheotomy? I suggest there probably is. But that's an example of regression. Repression, hey, I just hide it from myself. I told you about my repressed experience. And sublimation. If Freud were correct, as a young man, I had fantasies, sexual fantasies about my mother. Don't think I did. Wouldn't admit to it if I did. But if Freud were correct, every young man does. We sublimate that drive by putting it out towards someone else. If we're healthy, it's some significant other, our wife or whatnot. Not or whatnot, better be your wife, guys. When we look then at quick overviews of models, there are three that fit in the area that we're discussing today, of the unconscious and uncovering and motivating and re-scripting. The first one is the magical mind of Carl Jung. Now, I have great respect for Jung. Great psychologist. He's the man that essentially told us there was a collective unconscious. And that collective unconscious was ever present. And we tapped into it. And that might explain such things as serendipity and synchronicity. Why there are 20 scientists, 20 different parts of the world working on the same project, making the same breakthrough at the same time without any communication. Well documented. But Jung and the interpreters of Jung have made this kind of a magical unconscious. Hey, I don't know if it's magical or not, but I know I'm not going to go down that path and try and be a scientist. So I'm going to tell you we're not going to use any magical mind concepts. Dynamic unconscious, I've covered that. Parts of that are very controversial, I think rightly so. Part of it is not. I'm going to opt for who? William James. He coined the term stream of consciousness, and that's what we're going to talk about in our model today. What is a stream of consciousness? It's all that self-talk, all that chatter in my mind. Do I know it exists? Sure, I live with it every day. Do you know it exists? Sure, you live with it every day. We all experience that chatter. Does that chatter agree with everything I want? No. And that's the model we're going to use. We're going to look at cognitive engineering by changing the way we talk to ourselves. But before we do that, I want you to now condense this material into a model. Bill Gilroy, my friend who taught me it's okay to stand in front of all of you, you're not going to shoot me or throw darts at me, and I can double check and make sure my zipper's up, designed this. If we look at our expectation again, reality is what we believe to be true. Is that right or wrong? Somebody tells you that this reality is not real, it's an illusion. Can you really believe that? I mean, I believe it academically, but I'm kind of the philosopher John Locke was. René Descartes argued, I doubt that I am, therefore I am. Well, if his appendix was ruptured, he wouldn't doubt that he existed. You know, when you're in pain, you don't doubt that you exist. If I doubt this exists and then I kick it as hard as I can, I won't doubt it for long. But in reality, quantum physicists tell us it doesn't exist. It's all waveform. Reality is what I believe to be true. What we believe to be true is therefore what we perceive. I don't know how many of you have seen the flick it's called What the Bleep, but it's full of renowned scientists. A lot of conversation goes on in this. It shows us what I believe to be true is not necessarily what's true. Perhaps the Aztecs in Montezuma were indeed easily conquered by an inferior army because, as they say in What the Bleep, they had never seen ships of that kind, so they literally didn't see them. They thought it was gods with their golden helmets walking on water, just as they report. If we haven't ever seen it, is it possible for us to see it? What we believe to be true is what we perceive. What we perceive is what we look for, or what we expect, good, bad, or indifferent. What we look for is what we know. What we know is what we believe to be true. And what we believe to be true is reality. And we just go in that circularity. So in other words, If my expectation says something cannot exist, it cannot exist. It's that simple. And you won't prove otherwise. It just simply is outside of my realm of belief. I'll refuse to look at it some way or another. My reality will be made up without that. Is that reality? I don't think so. When you look at a model of the mind, we have an unconscious. If we just use Einstein's model, that represents probably 90% of our total mental capacity. We do a lot of things with neuroscience today, and we trace all the activities of the brain. We can say, look, if you're an adult and you're trying to learn a second language, you're going to develop a new area that is adjacent to your language center to process that. It's going to be more difficult than if you're a child. We can tell you lots of things about the tickings of the brain and how it relates to what we call perception. But remember white crows? We really can't build a good model. We have savants, a famous savant, who can read 2 books at the same time. Has no corpus callosum. Not only can he read one with the right eye and one with the left eye at the same time, he remembers every word he read. And of some 3,500 books, he can recite every one of them word for word. We have a twin savants, 2 of them, that have the ability to do prime numbers. They do it for fun, as fast as a computer. Now, I'm not talking about prime numbers like 1, 3, 5. We're talking about prime numbers that are 30, 40 integers long. How is that possible? We don't have an explanation for those things. With all of our mapping, with all of our understanding, we're still at a loss for the power of the mind. We're still at a loss for being able to explain these various white crows or anomalies of consciousness. Well, what we're going to do with our model is we're just going to make it really simple. Okay, 90% of the total brain capacity is unconscious. That leaves 10%, which is the popular, this is what I use. And in that popular, this is what I use, it would appear that about 3%, if you go along with the statistics that are generated by lots of people, and I qualify that because I have trouble with those statistics. I mean, when we don't know how deep something is or how high something is, how can you get into percentages of anything? But I'll go along with them for the sake of our model. 3% is our consciousness, what we're aware of right now. And 7% is what we call preconscious. Now, what's preconscious? Well, you know, I remember the lyrics to the song Vaya con Dios, but I don't always have them right there. If I start to think about it, let's see, how did that go? Then I remember it. Our preconscious holds a lot of information that is accessible to us, but that we don't run around every minute of the day holding in consciousness. Our preconscious also communicates somehow with our unconscious and somatic information processing. What's somatic information processing? So what's going on in my body right now, your body right now, and every day and every minute that we're alive. And I'm typically not aware of it. But if suddenly my heartbeat goes boom, 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 I become aware. That's the somatic information. Somehow the unconscious can communicate that, get our attention through the preconscious, and it comes into consciousness. All right, so in this model, most of who we are and what we know, we just simply don't understand. It's hidden, if you will, in the subliminal part of the mind. 4 drives. I'll never forget, I had a professor, a very famous professor, who said to me, you know, you can always remember it if you think of it as there are the 4 F's. Now, this is for English speakers, and please, I don't want to offend anybody, and you might have to fill it in some. If you don't get it, that's okay. Drives are fundamental aspects of the human creature that we all seek. It's a species-oriented mechanism as well as an individual-oriented mechanism. The first drive is fight. The second drive is flight. Fight, flight, we all know that. The next drive is feeding. We have to feed, don't we? We have to eat. And the last drive in any mixed audience, unless you're talking to cops, is breeding, propagation of the species. He called it his 4F seminar. We all got it, you never forgot it. Today we have a fifth drive. That fifth drive in the Western world seems to be more. I want more. I want more. Yesterday I was having a conversation here as they were preparing everything, and I happened to talk about this fifth drive, and the fellow that I was talking to says, well, you know, we don't have so much of that. No, that isn't something that goes on in Malaysia. But wow. And this morning I picked up today's newspaper, your newspaper, not mine. And what do I find on page 3? Visit Singapore for stress relief. Shop your stress relief away. But really, they got the same problem we've got. I want more. We've turned everybody into consumers. Consumption is therapy. You know, if I'm depressed, if I'm stressed, I'll go shopping. Now this picture, I guarantee you get today's paper. There's this very beautiful woman, and she must have 10, 12 pairs of shoes out in front of her, and she's just deciding which one she wants in the convenience of this Shangri-La. So maybe you don't have that drive, but in the Western world we see it everywhere. I want more. What do you want more of? I want more fame. I want more attention. I want more love. I want more friends. You know, it's like a child. I'm bored. I want something. Buy me something. I want more. I want more cars. I want more success. I want more money. I want more. You know what we don't hear? I want more awe. When I was a boy, I'll never forget walking out my front door one day, and we had a rose bush. And this rose bush had a beautiful young red flower on it. And it had rained lightly the night before, and there were these little pearls of water on this rose. And the sun was just hitting it perfectly, so that every one of them lit a rainbow of colors that was falling on the back of my house, right behind it. I looked at that and beheld it in awe. Wow, what beauty. And remember that to this day, because the first sense I probably had of awe was the glorious beauty in that rose. That rose to me smells sweeter than any rose I've ever smelled in my life, and I'm sure it had nothing to do with the scent of the rose itself. It was the awe of that moment. I don't hear anybody say, I want more awe. You don't hear too many people saying, you know, I just want more peace. I want to feel comfortable with myself, at home with myself. I just want more peace. Now, this fifth drive seems to be outward, like so much of everything that we look for in our lives. We have a metaphor. It's a story of the creation. We have all these archangels, and their job is to hide God. Now I'm going to use God today this way. G for grand, O, organizing, D, designer. We all have lots of words for the grand organizing designer. Culture to culture, religion to religion, there are different words. So I'm not talking about any one, I'm talking about one. The grand organizing designer has commissioned the archangels to hide himself from man. And they get together and they say, okay, well, we probably ought to hide him at the bottom of the sea. No. Man's cunning, he'll get to the bottom of the sea. Well, let's hide him in deep space. No. He'll sooner or later get to deep space. And they come up with 2 or 3 other ideas, and finally, one says, I know, let's hide him inside man. He'll never look. And that's a pretty powerful metaphor if you think about it for a moment, just as a metaphor. What is awe? It's a sense that there's something greater than myself. And does that have any power over me and my behavior and my life and my health? Absolutely. Study after study after study shows the value of honor. This fifth force in our Western world is simply more. I want more toys, I want more money, I want more success, etc. Let's start to tie things together, all right? And we have fight and flight. Anxiety and depression in modern man is fight and flight. You know, if I'm going to fight, I'm ready. And what is anxiety? It's a heightened states of arousal where my system is filled with adrenaline and other neurochemicals. All of a sudden, my stomach doesn't work because it's not important. Everything's gone out to the exterior. I am ready to fight. And what is depression in its deepest sense? Absolute withdrawal, total flight, indeed, even suicidal flight in chronic depression. We've discovered a system of beliefs. I call them subliminal beliefs because, hey, look, that just fits. You call them subconscious beliefs. We have a whole structure of beliefs inside our subconscious. And if we were to put those on a hedonic calculus, and I'm using that after hedons of pleasure and hedons of pain from the Greek philosophers, we would say that this calculus on one end has love, peace, security, the beauty, the glorious part about human nature, your total potential. And on the other end, it has anger and fear. And I'll tell you what I've learned over the years, and this works in English. Anger, a nasty, getting even response. Fear, for every anger response, there is a nasty getting even response. I'm going to tell you this. You don't get angry unless you're threatened. You may not think so, but you're afraid of something when you get angry. Somebody cuts you off, 5 o'clock traffic, they just cut in front of you. What happened? You're angry? Why? You got to slow down and you're going to be off a middle of a second and getting home? Why? Because he stole something from you, didn't he? He took my place. And they can't do that, can they? Well, why? Because it's wrong. And I'm afraid if I let somebody do it, I'll let everybody do it. See, there's no such thing as anger without fear. Period. On that side, I have all the negative stuff that you can see that humans have done to humans over generations and time immemorial. All right. On the other side, I have the highest potential that resides in the human condition. Along this calculus, then, we have to recognize that sitting in the center is our desire to avoid rejection and our survival mechanisms, our drives. They make up the model of our mind. And if you don't believe that the greatest motivation you have subconsciously is to avoid rejection, you haven't really looked at yourself. Because we all need to be loved. And you may as well understand that. We all need arousal and we all need to be loved. That is the human condition. Being rejected, whether it's how the boss looks at me and I sense rejection, something my mate says to me, that hurts. That's painful. What's more, it's threatening. And this is how. We have two kinds of stimuli that trigger these responses. One we can call imaginary threats. What's an imaginary threat? Hey, the guy that cut me off in 5 o'clock traffic is not a real threat, is it? The way my boss looks at me, that's not a real threat, is it? I make it a real threat. I make it seem like a real threat. But is it a saber-toothed tiger? A real threat? Huh? Is it a 357 at my head? Should fight, flight, anxiety, depression be set off by those synthetic stimuli? Well, the answer is no, but it is. It is in every one of us. There are two ways to be tied up in the world. Somebody can physically bind me. I'm tied up. I can attach a string to this microphone and refuse to pull it hard enough to break the string or to let go of it and walk away. If I have a belief that is a string and I'm holding on to it, it's my little chicken yard belief, I'm tied up. I promised you I was going to tell you the most important part of today, something that will change your life if you're willing to do it. Something that will add longevity and it will add health, and that's guaranteed. How did the inmate population tie themselves up? After all these psychometrics I told you about, we interviewed them. And you know what I heard from them over and over and over and over again? I mean, it can be summarized this way. Hey, my daddy was an alcoholic, my mommy was a prostitute, the neighbor boy hung heroin on me when I was 12 years old, but for the grace of God, there go you. And you know, almost all of that was nonsense. What were they doing? They were blaming where they were on somebody else. Not my fault. What is this thread? It's blame. Anyone that doesn't have someone or something they blame in their life is probably ready to start walking on water. Blame. It's the most debilitating thing you can do. Why? Because if you blame, you disenfranchised yourself. It's not my fault. What's that mean? I don't have to do anything about it, man. You do it for me. You change. It's not me. I'm not responsible. Isn't that what blame does? Blame literally executes your free will. Krishnamurti, the great philosopher, J. Krishnamurti, passed away recently in Ohio. I guess recently, I'm getting old. 12 years ago, 15 years ago, said this: choice is an illusion that grows out of confusion. If I know clearly what to do, there is no choice. Now think of it this way. If I have choices, any of them that I might make, but I have excluded myself from making them by just simply saying it's not my fault, it's yours, what value is free will? What value is choice? Blame is the most important thing for you to just eradicate from your life. Blame comes in aggregates. Shame, guilt, they all tie us up in one way or another. And it's not that shame is necessarily bad, because maybe there are things that are shameful that each of us have done. But we have to learn to let go of that, not bring it along with us. We have to learn to forgive. You remember our inmate population? If I'm going to interrupt their receptivity, what have I got to do? I got to stop them from displacing responsibility. They have to begin to take responsibility themselves. Make the choices themselves. How can I do that? 3 magic messages that we have tested in so many domains, ranging from like attention deficit hyperactive disorder to dart throwing, athletic performance. I forgive myself. I forgive all others. I am forgiven. When I went to the Department of Corrections, the people involved had said, you know, hey, this is what we want to put on this program. Man, are you kidding? I forgive? Suddenly it was, oh, I don't know. They were suspicious. And isn't that grace? Isn't that religious? Isn't that spiritual? Can we do something more psychological? There's nothing more psychological that you can do. 20 years ago, this may have been pioneering. It's not pioneering today. You can't pick up a journal anywhere that doesn't have an article on the power of forgiveness. Those 3 messages literally liberate you. Well, if they liberate me, what does that afford me? And before we go on to this, I'm once again going to tell you a story. choices. So imagine walking down the street in New York City. Those of you who visited New York, the Big Apple, and the high-rise condos, boy, these are $1.5 million, $2 million condos before the real estate boom. And I'm walking along, kind of looking, skyline, and from a third-store balcony, flower pot falls. Bam! Hits me in the head. Falls to the ground, pot breaks, flower falls out. I have some choices. I bet you can all think of this one. You sue this guy. He's got a lot of bucks. Look at the place he lives in. I'll claim, concussion. Get my digital little portfolio out and call my attorney right now. Do that. Oh, I wanted to be John Wayne. I'm going to take this broken flower pot and put it where. But I get to the door and I see this guy as a linebacker for the Chicago Bears. Excuse me? I can be metaphysical. Thank you. That probably brought some enlightenment to me. What else can I do? What could I do that would turn this situation into thank you, gratitude situation? Oh, what if I were to take that flower, go over to the corner florist, have it repotted, take the pot back to the owner. It fell off your balcony, pot was broke, wanted to return it to you repotted. Of all the things I could have done, which one would have made me feel the best? You're right, last one. My body would have been filled with all those good, warm, fuzzy chemicals. I would have had a moment of ah. I had a great laugh looking at the expression on the person's face. That would have been my best, wouldn't it? How many of us would think of that? Choices. When we undo blame, guilt, shame, we have the ability to uncover a new self. We suddenly have a whole new horizon, a whole new vista of choices. And those choices manifest our free will. The confusion, anger, fear disappears. Goes away. Now to digress, we have that puzzle in place. Let's finish the technology puzzle. Remember, we're assembling puzzles. Turns out to be shadowing technology. I didn't think it was all that revolutionary. All my colleagues said, wow, nobody's ever done this, you ought to patent it. Well, I did. But I also give it away to therapists. I tell therapists how to do it, etc., because there's an advantage to working one-on-one with clients. And I'm going to tell you what we do. What is shadowing? It's not a buried message. What is a buried message? In the United States, if you advertise something, say something will do something, make certain claims, you better be able to support them. Because otherwise, we're going to have some government agency, they're going to come in and they're going to say, show me. And they're going to fine, shut you down, and do other things if you can't show them. Well, there was a company, remember these companies that made programs that I couldn't find anything on? They got in some trouble in Texas, the Attorney General's office in the state of Texas, and asked this company to put up or shut up, and they contacted me because I'm supposed to be this guru, and said, can you help us in this case? First thing I asked him was, well, how did you create your programs? Well, we'll have an audio engineer send you the details. Oh, finally, the secret recipe to Coca-Cola. And in come the details. The audio engineer certifies that he mixed the affirmations 40 dB beneath the primary carrier. Okay, we're not going to go into audio acoustics. I'm just going to explain it this way. 40 dB beneath waves or music. What is that? The theoretical limit to a ghetto blaster is 30 dB. Do you get that? It can only get out 30 dB. What's 40 dB? It's what's going on at the symphony concert that's taking place, where do you want it to be? Singapore right this minute? And how it's affecting us. Don't you hear it? Isn't it beautiful? That's what it is. It's invisible. It's not real. I mean, in order for a stimulus to be a stimulus, it must meet a certain threshold. And in an audio stimulus, it must trigger a neuron. If it's insufficient to do that, it simply doesn't exist. Understand that? When I started my research, designing these things, the first thing I took into consideration is something known as hemispheric laterality. That's the right brain and the left brain. We developed what we call the mirror imaging paradigm, and it basically works like this. First of all, our left hemisphere for us right-handers is typically the linear logical center of our brain. It processes language, it thinks mathematically, it is the logic center. Our right hemisphere, on the other hand, just about everybody gives subconscious activities to, but it is spatial, it is oriented artistically, it is so overgeneralized that I want to be careful here. Where I come from, if you see a left-hander, you might jump to the conclusion that they're going to be a musician. Not necessarily so. But the body is cross-wired. And if we're right-handed, that typically demonstrates that we're very left-brained. And things that are linear, we're going to favor and be predisposed to. If we're left-handed, that means we're right-brained. And that typically means music and art and things of that. But the brain is amazingly redundant. And in its redundancy, that is too much of a simplification. There are left-handers that are brilliant mathematicians and vice versa, right-handers that are brilliant artists. But we tend to generally think of it as lateralized by speciality. You think of it this way. If you were an athlete and I took two balls, I held them so far apart and I threw them to you, and I said, catch them, and you tried to look them both into your hand, you would drop them. You cannot do that. You simply cannot do that. But if you take your eyes off them, you can pick them up pretty easy. The brain specializes, and in its specialization, one hemisphere has clearly been shown to specialize more in linear, logical, analytical, and the other more in the spatial and the artistic. So I don't want you to go away thinking it's either or, even though there's a lot of literature that says there is. You remember I told you about the lie detection test? I ran the tape backwards. The guy said, no, I didn't take the missing money. And backwards it said, liar. Remember that? Now, if there's anything controversial, really controversial, I'm going to discuss with you today, that's this next area. Carl Pribram said the brain's holographic. Said so 30 years ago. Brilliant scientist, Stanford University. Boy, Carl Pribram says so. I paid attention. Pribram, however, didn't. He kind of went away because it wasn't real popular, and he is a very well thought of professor. But not everybody went away. They took his idea and they started doing a lot of research. What do you mean holographic? The brain's holographic. Well, you know, when I went to school, they taught us that memory was encoded in so-called engrams and egrams. That is, look, you know, we had special compartments in the head. I'll bet that looks funny. Special compartments in the head where we just stored all our information. Utilizing rats, we anatomically have removed different parts of the brain from maze-bright rats, rats that run a maze very quickly, until there's no place left for memory to be. And they still run the maze. You say, well, how's that possible? If it's encoded here and we remove the section, how's that possible? The hippocampus is gone, hypothalamus is gone, neocortex is gone, the frontal lobe is gone. Oh, where is this memory? Well, according to Carl Pribram, it's holographically stored across the entire brain. And according to modern research, that pretty well stands as that's how the brain encodes information. You can take n-grams and e-grams and throw them away. That's a fact. The brain mirrors information. This mirror processing information gives rise to the controversial subject I mentioned earlier. Do we learn language in reverse and then mirror it to the other hemisphere? You know, the universe is kind. At the time I'm working on this, young lady, dyslexic, doing what all young people do. Not all, but a vast majority. She's writing 5s and S's backwards. How many of you have seen that in your own children? Instead of this, it's this. Instead of this, it's this. It's very, very common. They typically outgrow it. It's not dyslexia in a clinical sense. Well, what are they doing? What's going on that causes this backwards writing? Well, I theorized that Pribram was right, and the brain must be mirroring information. If it mirrors information, it would be creating a holograph, interfering patterns. Those interfering light patterns would cause the pig to appear to be on top. There are two mirrors. They're refracting light. The refraction of that light takes this little tiny pig that's down in the middle and stands it up. It's no longer in there. It's right here, right on the top. But it really isn't. It's a holograph. That's where the memory is going. But then if that's the instance, does that explain masking, shadow tasking? That was my next question. You see, if Pribram was right, that could be the mechanism behind this kind of tasking. The picture. You see what he's doing up there? What's in his left hemisphere is in his right visual field. What's in his right hemisphere is in his left visual field. He is mirroring that information. When we do shadow listening tasks, the top one illustrates a well-known study that's been replicated many, many times, where we essentially take two stories. We tell one story to this ear, we tell another story to this ear, and the brain makes up one story. It just doesn't hear all the words. It makes up one story. The volume is exactly the same. We send random numbers, say, to the right ear. To the left ear, we might tell a story like, I was walking down the street one day. Then we shift and we start telling random numbers, 17, 22, 19. And in this ear, landed on my shoulder and gave me a kiss. And then we ask you, what did you hear? I was walking down the street one day when a bird landed on my shoulder and gave me a kiss. I never heard the numbers. This is called shadow tasking. If the mind is mirroring information, and if the hemispheres are specialized, does that explain why I make one story, or I don't hear the numbers, I only put one story together? To me, the answer is yes. A lot of the literature is in total agreement. A friend of mine says, Eldon, one day you're going to win the Nobel Prize. A dozen others say, Eldon, I think you're over the deep end. We'll get to the proof. Remember, I'm the pragmatist. Does it work? If I'm right, then we have two hemispheres mirroring. You see the word up there, cat? Our dominant left brain has to learn to turn that word into the forward cat, or the S into the forward S, the 5 into the forward 5. We would process information that way. Our visual center, our spatial center, two different images. I'm processing a word. The word may be beautiful, but I'm also processing the picture, beautiful. One of my favorite little sayings to impress you with beautiful, whenever you see a beautiful woman, and for women maybe this is a handsome man, you know there's a God. But there is a visual image attached to every word that we have. If I tell you there is a griffin, and a griffin is part eagle and part lion. Head of a lion, body, wings of an eagle. You have a